Yeah, what?
Just say
hold on, let me get my
ninja.
pen.
It's totally fine. The ninja, a ninja.
The ninja, a ninja, our ninja.
Yeah. I know it's a tough call, but at the same time trying to
keep your
sell the
anonymity.
image.
So, what is it? Ninja, aka White Trash Ninja.
Yep.
White trash ninja, I like that.
Came from a tuna can. This can with I cut open this tuna can lid all janky. Picked it up. There's so many sharp ones. This looks like a white trash ninja star. Like, well,
All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Between You, Me, and Jose, the Slims Presents podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. If this is your first episode, thanks for checking it out. Before we get down to the nitty-gritty, I wanted to mention that you can now subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. We have all our episodes up there in audio form. You can also find us on Stitcher, and of course on YouTube, or you can just go every Wednesday to the Slims Presents blog and you'll see our posts as they come up. So today we have a little bit of a different show. We are debuting a potential new cast member, Philip Kalla over here. Is that how you say it?
Kalla, whatever. Doesn't really matter to me. Yeah. We like to switch things up around here. See what takes. See what we can improve. So, Phil is going to sit in for this episode, maybe another few episodes. We'll see how it goes. And, Donnell can't always be here. So he's a very busy guy, very important person. He is.
Right now, he's doing some very important things at some very important place in the Bay Area. So he's not with us tonight, but Phil is sitting in. We're going to have some good conversation, and we're going to have a few guests tonight. Our first guest here is a little bit of a mystery man. We're going to refer to him as Ninja, a.k.a. the White Trash Ninja, a.k.a. WT Ninja, of the band, what's the name of the band?
Friends Without Benefits.
Friends Without Benefits, that's right. He's going to be going and doing an open mic at Bottom of the Hill in just a little bit, so we got to get his segment on the podcast done with so he can catch an Uber or a Lyft or whatever.
Whatever alternative cab company is cool these days.
Yeah, whatever the kids are into. And he's going to be going over and doing that at Bottom of the Hill, which is a great venue. If you've never been to Bottom of the Hill, you should check it out. But Mr. Ninja here does some blogging for Slims Presents from time to time. He's an accomplished videographer, I'd say. Does a lot of stuff for us. Does a lot of stuff for Consequence of Sound. You might have heard of that blog. He was out at Coachella this year covering it for Consequence of Sound. And that's pretty much, what I want to talk about today is festivals and what your opinion of the festival was. But first, let's get down to what you were there doing. What was your experience like, and what were you, because you were working, so.
Yes. This was actually my 8th year going to Coachella. It is probably the festival I have attended for the longest amount of time in my life. And I have gone to the festival as a spectator and as a worker. So this year I was working. I was taking pictures of just about every band I could possibly get to. It's a lot of running whenever you're photographing a festival like that. But I'd say I shot about 30 to 40 bands that weekend and got some photographs I really liked. A lot that I was very upset with. But I mean, what it came down to was, even though I was working, I did get to see some great performances, which I think is what Coachella is actually and truly all about at its core.
Now, did you go for both weekends or just first or second? What?
Just weekend one. I always joke weekend one or bust, but in a way it's kind of true because you start to read about all these things on the internet, when they happen the first weekend. I think the prime example was that Tupac hologram that came
Right.
a couple of years ago. And, after it happened, the surprise element that you would have had if you had gone the first weekend
You kind of lose that.
was totally gone the second weekend. I mean, I wasn't there, but I can imagine.
So you didn't get to see the Tupac hologram.
Only the first weekend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's one aspect that like festivals have gotten so big now that, Coachella adds a second weekend now where it's pretty much they try and recreate the same set for both weekends, which seems odd to me, but they got to make that money.
Well, it does seem strange. I mean, they were the first to do that, and then Austin City Limits, I think, was the next to jump on that wagon. But I know Sasquatch Music Festival up in Washington just did that recently. They tried to go for the second weekend route. Their whole thing was, though, that they had two totally different festival lineups each weekend, and one was 4th of July weekend, and that one undersold to the point where I think they wound up canceling it.
Wow.
At least that's what I've heard. So that's a bummer that didn't work out. But I don't understand the whole 2-weekend concept because I feel it makes festivals a little less special in that regard. You can't recreate that magic again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is that what you think the vibe is of like having, if the first weekend was off the hook, is there a lot of pressure for the second weekend to like be even better? I mean, it's hard to ask because you weren't at both weekends, so you can't compare and contrast.
Well, I do know that like a good example is that last year, I believe it was James Blake performed at Coachella both weekends, and the first weekend, as far as I know, he didn't have any surprises or anything. But the second weekend, it was seen around the internet that he brought the RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan out on stage with him, and that was only a second weekend type deal. Now I'm guessing that there are some contract issues here within these festivals that last 2 weekends where it's like, okay, you got to play the same set list and stuff. But I wonder what their guest appearance clause reads.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's we'll get into contracts like in a little bit later because that's a separate issue that I do want to talk about because it is a big thing with festivals, the business side that people don't quite understand. But what was your experience this year, and how does it compare to past years of Coachella?
Well, that is the question I could not wait to answer, frankly. Get a little water down the throat there. So as I said before, I've been going to this festival for 8 years, and this year, when people came up to me after the festival and asked me, how was it? What was it like? Tell me everything. My response was pretty much the same for everybody, and that was, it was it was not great. It was not terrible, but it was definitely different. The Coachella I know is long and gone at this point.
What do you mean by that? Like
this year in particular, the entire festival sort of reeked of celebrity, Hollywood, tabloid BS. There were so many celebrities walking around the festival. I mean, that's kind of always the case. You'll always see like Paris Hilton or Danny DeVito walking around. This year, it seemed like twice the celebrities were there. And before I left for the festival, I was reading all these articles in the news that people, particularly famous people, were going down to Coachella. They were getting paid to be there, and it was to wear like designer clothing to kind of showcase new fashions.
Right.
And the prime example that came to mind, which really bummed me out, because I'm a big fan of his, but Aaron Paul, who plays Jesse Pinkman on Breaking Bad, he demanded like $15,000 and artist wristbands for him and his girlfriend, and that he always seemed like such a down to earth guy that really bummed me out. But I mean, I saw Jared Leto walk out of a tent at one point, and a flock of teenagers just like ran over to him. I couldn't even tell who it was at first. It was just this dude with
eyeliner,
and a goofy beard. I can't picture him with a beard. And I was kind of like, who is this? And everyone's just taking selfies with him every 5 seconds. And I'm like, man, I would hate to be that guy right now. And then I realized it was Jared Leto.
Yeah.
But that was the kind of vibe. And it was even at the point where during the Arcade Fire's Sunday night headlining set, Win Butler came out on stage and said something along the lines of, we know there's a lot of VIP bullshit at this festival this year, but it's not actually as cool in person as you think it would be. And then they started their set. And I thought that was super cool because they're probably one of the biggest bands in the world right now, and they are kind of like off-put by the whole vibe that was going on there. But like I said, it almost seemed like Coachella was trying to make that part of their art or niche market. Like, yeah, you get to go and party with all these famous people for the weekend. Isn't that cool? Isn't that something to write home about? And the answer is no for me, because I've always gone to Coachella because the music there was just so great. That's what any festival should be at its core. It's about the music. It's about the selection of bands being in one location for one weekend. And now you asked how it differed from the previous years. I can remember being there in like 2008 or 9, and the people that other patrons were excited for. And you got to remember, I was much younger at this point. I didn't even live at California back then. I was still flying from my home state to come visit. But people were always there for like random DJs, one-off performances, or some obscure reunion that I didn't even know was happening.
Yeah.
Like a couple of years ago, I know London Suede was there, and like I didn't even know who they were, but there were people who were really excited about that. But that's kind of died now. People go for that, like the artist with the top 40 hit, or that one person who puts on the crazy light show. Like I heard Skrillex had one of the most packed shows of the weekend. Like people couldn't even get inside the tent that he was playing. And meanwhile, there were legends like Motorhead playing, and I didn't even get to, my pictures didn't even see the light of day of Motorhead. They were taken, but nobody cared.
Really?
Nobody wanted to see Lemmy in the flesh.
Shameful.
Yeah.
Truly shameful.
I'm so glad you're saying these things, because I feel the same exact way. And when people talk to me about Coachella, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills when I tell them these things. They're like, I feel like nowadays, because I used to go back in 2007, back when I feel like it was still a little bit of what it began as. And these days, I feel like people care about not who's playing, but who's going. Like you just said about the celebrities and whatnot. But everyone just says, hey, I got tickets to Coachella. Who should I see? It's like, why did you buy tickets if you don't? Why are you asking me that? Like, why are you even going then if you have to ask?
Part of the fun of going when I was younger was that, you're right, people will ask you who to see. I feel now people go with a more general conception of who they should go to, and it's usually, like I said, groups with that one hit or whatnot. But the fun for me used to be like I could go and explore all these artists that I had never heard before. And I can remember going back. My first year was 2007, but 2008 was definitely with a point where I started to kind of explore more of the lineup. And first band that jumped out at me that year was Vampire Weekend. And they hadn't even put out their album yet. They were still brand new. I always feel like such a hipster when I tell this story, of course. It's like, I knew them so long ago, like before they were cool. But no, their album hadn't even come out yet. And I found it online, and I was blasting it for months before the festival. And I was like, this is so good. Like, who are these guys? What is their show going to be like? And they played at like 2:00 in the afternoon on the first day of the festival on like a side stage. And me and my friend were loving it. We couldn't believe that these guys were like, they didn't have half the attention that they have now. But that's how I got to find out about them. And that's how I learned more about, people like Connor Oberst, Animal Collective, Death Cab for Cutie, LCD Sound System. That was a big one. It's definitely what sparked my interest in a band like Pavement. all going to Coachella these years, I learned about all these bands, and some of them have carried on with me throughout, the rest of my life, and I'll continue to carry them because of those experiences. But I don't know, the researchers clearly aren't there anymore, as people probably know due to the ridiculous press surrounding Outkast's first weekend performance, where people didn't seem to know who they were.
Yeah, that was a big one. That was like the show that everyone was talking about, and then it seemed like the first weekend was kind of a letdown in a way.
Well, they cut Andre's mic off.
Did they? Because I heard from people that they got the sense that he wasn't feeling it, or maybe just the technical problems pissed him off. But
well, I can understand why he wasn't feeling it if that was the case, because I'll tell you right now, where I was standing in the crowd, I was having a blast. I had never been to a hip-hop show that was like that interesting, besides maybe like one or two other sporadic ones. But they had great lights. They had personality when they rapped. They really like dipped into the back catalog of their career, they did a group set, and then they each did a solo set where, Big Boy did a lot of his speaker box stuff, and Andre did a lot of Love Below stuff. And then they came back at the end to do like a handful of their biggest hits. With that being said, I thought the show was great. Now, I was only in one little part of the crowd. I don't know what the rest of the crowd looked like from on stage, but if they weren't feeling it, it's probably because younger kids nowadays, who are Coachella's core audience, they don't care about Outkast. And this goes back to what I was saying before about people being more excited for obscure and once-in-a-lifetime performances. The kids nowadays, they're more interested in what's cool, what's popular, which is why they'll go to somebody like Skrillex or Lana Del Rey, somebody along those lines. But Outkast was something that was more my generation, I guess, and as a result, I feel like all those kids just missed the boat. They didn't get to hear any Outkast on the radio when they were growing up. They don't understand how important that was for our generation to see that finally happen. I mean, that was what I was most excited about, leading up to the festival. And it was a total bummer that kids just didn't seem to care.
So one of the things that is, I don't know about interesting, but noteworthy is how commodified these things are becoming. It's the same story for everything, but something that starts off as a very sort of underground niche thing that is creating something new, creating something unique, slowly gets adopted by the system and co-opted, and then before you know it, you're basically like, you thought you were going to a music festival, but you're really walking through that scene in Minority Report where like the ads are just talking to you left and right. Oh, hey, Mr. Ninja, I know that you like Outkast. You might want to buy this, toe sock with Outkast logo on it. I mean, I don't know.
I would totally buy those for
I
the
would buy
record.
those too.
If you know where to get Outkast toe socks, please email me, friendswithoutbenefitsband@gmail.com. Send me your Outkast toe socks. You are totally right. And I actually brought this topic up to Consequence of Sound a while ago for an article. And I just didn't really get it to a well-rounded enough idea to follow through on it. But my opinion is that smartphones and social media have just ruined the music festival.
Really?
And the reason is this. For smartphones, it's because we all know in America that smartphones are a huge problem. I mean, it's not just music festivals, it's smartphones while driving, it's smartphones while walking down Market Street to catch your train, it's just smartphones all the time.
Yeah.
Everyone is sucked in. And you would think that being in a place like Coachella or Outside Lands or whatever, Lollapalooza, you'd think you'd be able to just keep it in your pocket for the day. People still want to Snapchat. They still want to post stuff on Instagram. That's all they care about. It's like a giant postcard that says, I was here. Now, the reason social media killed it is because nowadays you have to register your wristband for a lot of these festivals. And what that means is like it connects to your Facebook and your Twitter account. And you can go to all these different places around the venue and you swipe your wristband and it updates all your social networking stuff for you. And my question is, why does anyone care? Like, why do your friends on Facebook care that you checked into the Gobi stage to see, the Pixies play at 8:00 at night? Nobody cares. They're not there. They don't need to read every little update of what you're doing and think about how much fun they're missing out on. But at the same time, how much fun are you having worrying about like, oh, I got to get to the place and check in and post all this stuff? Like, that's not fun. Like, just go out there and live it. See a band you didn't think you'd see. Get drunk and forget how to put on your sandals. Like, these are the things you should be doing at music festivals, not looking into your screens and your networks and stuff. But that's why it's become such a commodity, I think, is because now all these festivals know that not only can they make money off it, they can get so much advertising up the wazoo simply by all these internet social media things.
I mean, that's definitely one side of it where obviously it's in the business's best interest to get their name out there as much as possible. And these wristbands definitely help them do that in a very automated way that, gets them a ton of attention. It doesn't really do anything for the person that's doing it. I mean, aside from letting their friend know, I checked in to see the Pixies at 8:00, which is superfluous information, but it's like, on top of that, there's the fact that the whole festival experience should be a sort of transcendent experience where you're going and getting sucked in and you're being transported to this, different place that is outside your normal concept of reality. And it's supposed to be, an experience of a lifetime. And you can't have that experience when you're constantly checking out of it to like look back into the real world. Like, your focus is not on what it's supposed to be on. From a promoter's perspective, obviously we encounter the same problem here in the clubs. There's a huge backlash of people that want you to put your phones away, just enjoy the show, et cetera, et cetera. On the other hand, it's good for us when people are at shows taking pictures because that's marketing, that's getting your brand out there, that's, it's what it's all about. But for the audience, it's annoying to have someone standing in front of you with their camera, blocking your view. And that person is half tuned into the show, half tuned into whatever they're doing. And, the impression is that they're not fully enjoying it as much as they should be enjoying it because they're distracted by this other thing. But I don't know. I mean, I'm conflicted on it, obviously, because I don't want to be in a world where it's like you're dictating to people how they should enjoy an experience. If that person wants to create a memory for themselves, or they have a friend that has a broken leg and can't be there and they want to, include that friend. I mean, we hear about this shit all the time. People, just the other day at the Justin Nozuka show, the girls were going crazy. One girl was here and her friend was bedridden with some kind of ailment in the hospital. Couldn't be there. So the friend just fired up FaceTime and, for one song, just let her watch the show from her hospital bed. Part of me think that's cool, like that person is, gonna remember that for a long time. It's a special experience for them. But on the other hand, how was that for the person standing next to the person that actually paid and is trying to enjoy the show but keeps getting elbowed in the face by this person trying to get the right angle?
I'm late.
I mean, it's a strange concept, but I mean, when we had the Converse events here that you came and you shot for us, oh shit, that might have given away your secret identity. But
I like ceremony. It's okay.
But they had a big thing around social media. Obviously, the whole point is they're trying to push their product. But some of it was kind of cool, showing who was here from what area, stuff like that. And the photo wall, where people could, Instagram pictures would get put up on our wall on a digital display. I mean, it's cool that people are using this technology and taking it in interesting places. But at what point does it become a deterrent to what you're trying to actually accomplish?
It's definitely a tough line, especially at festivals where it's harder to control that amount of people. Like, I mean, if you had a group in here at a club like Slim's, it's a decent sized room, but it definitely, the performer has enough draw and control that they can say, all right, everyone put your phone away for this song. Or maybe it's the exact opposite. Everyone take your phone out for this song. Let's all film right now. We're going to post a giant video collage on Twitter, whatever. But at the same time, you have a group like Neutral Milk Hotel was the best example of this, but they walked out on stage on the last night of the festival this year, and Jeff Mangum just walked up to the mic and said, hey, everybody, let's all put your phones away and just enjoy this together. And I thought that was really great, and especially because it meant that I was not going to have to listen to a bunch of little kids trying to like push me out of the way and get a picture of Neutral Milk Hotel, and I could just sit there and enjoy the cuts from In the Aeroplane Over the Sea.
I mean, that's really tough, because I know a bunch of teenagers love Neutral Milk Hotel.
Do they?
No, I don't think they even know who they are.
I feel like if the artist makes a point to say, hey, put your phones away, people are pretty respectful of that. Like, I saw Neutral Milk Hotel on the first day at the Fox when they came through here, and there's signs posted everywhere, and he said the same thing. And I didn't see a single phone out. I even looked around because I thought, there's no way. There's going to be someone. And you look at the hashtags, there's that one person that's up in the balcony that's like trying to peek out their phone. But for the most part, everyone is really respectful of it, which is cool.
I feel like you have to be respectful to him, though.
That's true.
He's that kind of guy.
That is true.
So the other aspect of festivals that, for me, is one of the biggest issues is now that they've become such a huge commodity and people are making so much money off of festivals, not just the promoters and the festival planners, but the artists. I mean, the amount that artists get for festivals compared to a club appearance is crazy, because they know that they're going to have tons of sponsors, they're going to have the money, so they're just going to, hit them up for all they're worth. But because these festivals are such big business, they're springing up everywhere. We have, just in the Bay Area, we have several new festivals just within the last few years. Bottle Rock, First City, obviously Outside Lands, Hardly Strictly has been going on for 14 years this October. But they're just coming up left and right. And while for a music fan, that might be a cool thing. Like, oh, cool, I can go to a bunch of festivals and have a lot of great experiences. For a club, for a lot of the traditional industry around the music business, there's a side to it that the average person doesn't know about, which are things like radius clauses, contractual deals that these festivals invoke that essentially bar bands from playing within certain radiuses for basically a majority of the year. So if an artist is going to play, Coachella is a little bit different because it's kind of, in the middle of the desert. So, if you have a radius clause of 150 miles in each direction or something like that, you're not really stepping on anybody's toes. Maybe LA. I'm not quite sure how far it is from LA, but you get Coachella artists playing in LA around the festival. So
yeah, they usually do it so that in the week in between, artists can either go up to the Bay Area or go to Los Angeles or Phoenix and play, a one-off show somewhere else.
But you have an area like the Bay Area, which is a lot smaller, a lot more concentrated. And, you know, let's say an artist is booked at Bottle Rock or Outside Lands. That artist can't play anywhere else in the Bay Area for, you know, depending on who's making the deal, anywhere from like 6 to 9 months, which, you know, is essentially an entire year. And that's if you only have 1 or 2 festivals to contend with, you can work around that. But once every single fucking artist that you want to book is like barred by radius clauses and not able to play for half of the year because, you know, they maybe might hopefully get on Bottle Rock or, you know, one of these other festivals, that definitely throws a wrench in the operation. You know, it limits what we're able to do as a live music venue. There are a lot of artists that we want to have here that are touring that simply can't do anything here. They'll just sit around and do nothing instead of actually, you know, playing for their fans because they want the big money and big attention of a festival, which is understandable, but, you know, at the expense of the other kind of experience. So it's, you know, I just wonder what the breaking point is. Like how do you determine whether or not this is too much, or whether you're actually hurting the industry by adopting this model so fervently?
I mean, I think some of that does rely on the band's responsibility there. What I mean by that is if a band were to take a show at Outside Lands or at Bottle Rock or whatever Bay Area festival has a radius clause, it's that band's responsibility after that as soon as that clause is up, that they know that they have to come back to this area unless they live here.
Right.
They have to come back and play a show for those fans who weren't able to go to the festival. That kind of gets put on them after that. Because, yeah, I can understand from the perspective of a band as a business that you do need to get those gigs to keep the train moving along if you want to, you know, keep doing this. But at that point, if a band can't play in the Bay Area for 2 months after that, then as soon as that 2 months is up, they should get back as soon as possible so that those fans can indeed see it. That was a great thing about, I remember at Outside Lands last year, Waves played in the middle of the day. One of my favorite bands right now, and I was only able to catch half the set because I had to be elsewhere to take pictures. I believe it was the National, actually, who snatched me away. But, you know, 2-3 months later, Waves had their own solo show at Slim's, which was great for me because I only got to see a few songs. They're one of my favorite bands. And then I got to come and have a more intimate experience later on. An experience where I did not have to sit in a crowd of 10,000 people and fight to get that good spot in the pit. So when it comes to that, I do think that the band has to be somewhat responsible in that regard. But, you know, I also don't plan tours either. So
No, I mean, it's definitely a complicated operation because you have a lot of factors in there. Like, well, you know, this is just the American tour. They also have European dates they have to fill. And, you know, you have to plan this thing and you can't go from playing, or it's not economical, I should say, to go, you know, playing New York City one night and then fly across the United States to play the Bay Area the next day. You know, so these things have to get routed in certain ways that a lot of times limit what you can do when and where. So it's a very crazy world that we're living in right now, where like the entire music industry is being uprooted. And we've talked a lot on the podcast about how that affects young bands, how that affects bands that want to, you know, that grew up having dreams of being signed to a record label and putting out an album and stuff like that. And all these things are sort of passé at this point, you know. But this is another thing that we have to confront. literally the rug is being pulled out from every established way of doing things. So the industry going forward has to take a look at what happens when, this type of show becomes very, very popular and desirable, and starts to the point where it starts to impact the way other people do business. And we're living at a time where that is happening on all fronts, which is, in a lot of ways it sucks because you can never get your footing. But, in other ways it's an opportunity to remake things in a better way. But I'm speaking to you mainly as a journalist, because you've been covering many different kinds of festivals over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think the festival experience should fall in terms of like the overall live music experience? In terms of like, should there be a limit to the number of festivals you can have in any given area during a period of time? Or do you think that, it's a free for all?
I mean, it's going to be a free-for-all as long as it can be. Every blog, every production company, everybody wants to have their own festival. And if they don't want a festival, they want an event at a showcase like South by Southwest or something like that. The direction I think things are going to go in the next 5 years is you're going to see a lot more smaller, more intimate music festivals. I can remember when I was in high school and I was working at a summer camp with this girl she was a lot more extreme than I was, but she, before our summer together, had gone to what she called Awesome Fest. Now, Awesome Fest sounds like your standard festival. However, it was just in some kid's backyard. She basically wound up in this small town looking for Awesome Fest. She went to the local mini mart and asked, hey, where's Awesome Fest? No one knew what the hell she was talking about. And she eventually found Awesome Fest was painted on a beach towel hanging on some kid's mailbox. She said the festival was maybe 200 kids in some dude's backyard for 3 days, and it was a bunch of ska bands. Huh. And that is the direction I can see it more going. Because people, they don't just like going to the festival for all the bands. They like the lifestyle of it more than anything. You look at a band like Phish or the Grateful Dead, they'll throw their own festival. They don't have to have a bunch of bands. I went to a Phish festival down in Southern California once, and it was nothing but Phish for 3 days, 8 sets throughout the weekend, and there were maybe less than 30,000 people there, which for a festival, and this was at Coachella's grounds, by the way, to see that area that quiet. I mean, 30,000 people is still quite a few people, but to see it not sold out and there was breathing room and it was easy to get around, it was a totally different experience. It was a much more intimate experience. I felt like I could actually meet all the other people at the festival and have more conversations. It wasn't oversaturated to the point where I felt like I was lost and insignificant. But I can see the concept of smaller festivals taking root, and maybe not necessarily in major metropolitan areas like here, although I feel we do kind of already have that a little bit with something like Fano del Sol, which is the Bay Bridges Bay Bridges. I don't know how you'd pluralize that, but it's their little festival that they throw in Potrero. I see these smaller festivals being the harbor of what is going to come next, because people still do like to go to club shows. There is still a crowd of people that don't like festivals. They don't like the big sea of people. They like to be in that room with X amount of people, and they can almost touch the musicians, which is great. It's a great feeling. That's why I love going to club shows, and why it was much better to see a band like Saves the Day at Slim's than it would have been to see them at Lollapalooza. But I can see it being a smaller thing. You can promote smaller bands to headline, which is therefore going to cost your festival less money. And you can fill out the bill with all these bands that are actually struggling and trying to get that exposure and will actually appreciate that kind of exposure, rather than you have a mid-level band at a festival like Coachella, and they're just pissed off because they're playing up against a band like Kanye West. You know, I can remember being there when Kanye played a few years ago, and the punk band She Wants Revenge was in the tent. There was like nobody there, and they were just bitching about how Kanye West was stealing all their thunder. Well, while I think their anger was a little misdirected, I can totally get like, yeah, you're playing up against one of the biggest rappers in modern day music, and you're like a small time band. That would bum me out too, you know, to be there.
I mean, this is exactly what's going on in Austin as well with South by Southwest. Have you gone and covered South by Southwest at all?
I have never been to South by Southwest. My main beef with it, which is a whole topic for another day, I don't feel like it's a music festival or event for the common fan. I feel it's for the media, it's for the press, it's for big companies, and that's fine. They, you know, they're all looking to try and see some band in a small club at 12 noon, and, you know, I saw this band Tennis at 12 noon in a tiny bar. I saw history get made. But I feel like that vibe is even leaving South by Southwest. I have not ever been there, though.
Well, I mean, it started out sort of as a platform for independent artists to be launched for media and industry people to come to one place at one time and see a lot of unsigned independent artists, and then hopefully, you know, with the goal that these bands could maybe get signed, get deals with booking agents, stuff like that. But now you have people like Lady Gaga coming and performing at South by Southwest, Snoop Dogg, you know, just, I mean, I'm sure Kanye West, like the hugest fucking people, like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Like the whole reason this was set up is so that these people can compete against you.
Yeah.
Like, we can't compete. Let's start our own shit. And then, you know, they just flood in.
Well, I think what the shift in interest was that people went to these shows, they saw these smaller bands in small venues, and the attraction has shifted from the small bands in the small venue to the large bands in the small venue. The first time I can remember paying attention to South by Southwest at all, I was doing video for Consequence of Sound at the time, and somebody sent me a video of Jack Black like playing outside the Third Man record store bus, which is cool in its own regard. But I mean, he's huge. Jack White is absolutely enormous. Did he need to play outside to get all those extra fans? Probably not, but it's cool that he still played in this small setting. That is what South by Southwest, I feel, has kind of morphed into, was all these big bands now have a tiny platform to just reconnect them to the old days, I guess.
I kind of get that feeling too. Did you go to First City?
I did not go to First City.
That was really, it was quaint. It was cute. It was a small one.
I mean, I used to actually live right by where First City happens. So I thought it was interesting that as soon as I moved away, they finally had a festival down there.
There's definitely like an intimate festival, like we were saying earlier. It's definitely one to visit if you like the intimate feeling, but brought to a festival.
Mm-hmm. I still feel like that's going to be the future, because you look at something too like what we have here in San Francisco with Stern Grove. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think the venue maximum fits like 5,000 to 7,000 people within it. And that's like if it's like crammed, you know, but you still get that experience. You're in this tiny little outdoor venue with a bunch of families, and everyone's really close together and get to like socialize and partake. And that's what it should still be about. But I think oversaturation is the enemy.
I'll always be that guy that prefers the small venue, small club shows.
Well, that's why we come to Slim's.
Yeah.
Plug.
Just plug.
I'm that guy as well. Like I hate going to festivals because I'm kind of antisocial. I don't like being around a shit ton of people. It just makes me feel uncomfortable. Add to that, I'm pretty fucking tall. So every show I go to, I have to contend with like the fact that I'm towering above everybody and blocking their view and shit like that, which is only amplified. It's not my ideal situation. I prefer to go to a smaller venue because, you know, it feels more intimate to me. So that huge festival experience, like I've seen some great performances. I've had great experiences. I've had good days like going and hanging out at festivals, but it never feels like as special to me, you know? There are some things that you can't recreate, like seeing an artist performing as the sun is going down and everything just like gels together and you're like, oh shit, this is awesome. But you know, that's a few minutes out of the entire day. You still got to contend with, you know, standing in line to get, you know, a $7 bottle of water or, you know, use the porta potties or, you know, whatever the case may be. It's, you know, it's not my ideal circumstance.
That's why I like shooting them a lot better, because the media tent has perks such as clean bathrooms and free water. Two things I do not take for granted.
That's why I love the Hardly Strictly Bluegrass Festival in Golden Gate Park every year. I happen to work for the company that puts on the festival, and so we get to use the nice bathrooms that are in trailers, and they flush, and there's sinks and mirrors and all that kind of shit. VIP treatment.
Booyah.
But Mr. Ninja, I think you have to start bouncing out here.
I do. Thank you very much for having me tonight.
It's been real. What's your band's website?
You can check us out on Bandcamp. It is fwob.bandcamp.com. We are about to go into the studio to record about 8 songs, and those will be the first album that we put out very, very soon. So thank you for having me on the show. I'm always happy to chop it up about Coachella and festival life, and party on, Wayne.
All right, my man. Thanks for coming by. We're going to let you get off to your show. Just go out the front door, make sure it locks behind you, but otherwise you're all good. Cheers. But Ben, why don't you move into this seat? It's already, the mic's set up and everything. So we're playing musical guests here. Mr. Ninja is going to his show at Bottom of the Hill. Joining us now is Ben Cohn. He runs a site called dewhat.com, which he also writes a blog post for us every week about the hip-hop scene. And he covers a lot of awesome stuff. He's pretty knowledgeable about all things hip-hop. And so he was also at Coachella this... did you go to weekend 1 or weekend 2?
Weekend 1.
Okay. So let's hear what your experience was at Coachella. We heard, you know, you didn't hear Mr. Ninja's experience, but I want to hear a fresh perspective. What was your experience like?
Well, I had a pretty fantastic time. Coachella, it was a pretty last minute thing for me, but I hooked on to a group of friends who already had accommodations, like a rented house nearby and some stuff like that. And so overall, I had a fantastic time. I really got into Coachella. I knew I wanted to go when I was watching a live stream of Kanye's performance a few years ago, and he was performing Power. And he said that while he was writing the song Power, all he was thinking about was performing it at Coachella. And I was like, damn, all right, I have to get there pretty soon. Like, if someone like Kanye is thinking about this exact festival or this event while writing music, I was like, I have to go see what it's all about. And so, yeah, it did not disappoint overall.
So you, as far as I know, you went with a little bit of a different perspective than a lot of people go to festivals with, where you didn't really want to check out the people that you already knew. You were kind of trying to get exposed to stuff that you might not have seen otherwise. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. One thing I enjoy about festivals is that since there are always so many different bands, so much music going on, and it's going on for a few days, I really like to take advantage of seeing new bands, people I haven't heard of, people that I might not necessarily see otherwise. You know, like my favorite artists, I've either already seen or I know that if they come to San Francisco, I'm definitely going to be there,
Right.
any venue. And so I look at Coachella as a chance to see some artists that I probably wouldn't go pay for a ticket to see otherwise. And so, yeah, I had a few friends with me whose musical opinion I respected and trusted, and I just kind of went with them and let them introduce me to a lot of different bands.
Well, did you experience that a lot of other people were experimenting like that as well?
I think at any festival, that at all of the shows, there are people who aren't familiar with the artist. So in that sense, there's always going to be people who are checking out new music. I'm particularly open to new music and new things, and I know that a lot of people are very specific about what they like or might not be as open to experimenting with different genres, or to be, you know, to waste an hour maybe at a set that they didn't like, but willing to take that risk. And so I do think there were a lot of people that were always checking out new bands and always discovering the band on stage for the first time. So I hope that that some of them enjoyed it and that they all had an open mind at least, but who knows?
Before we go too far, I wanted to just let you know, this is Phil,
Nice to meet you.
Ben. So just get the intros out of the way. I'm Chris. You already know me. What was your favorite set that you experienced this year?
It's tough because the Outcast is one of my favorite groups of all
Right.
time, and they were the reason that I was gonna go to Coachella. You know, as interested as I am in new bands, I wouldn't have gone without knowing enough people. You know, someone that I really wanted to see. And I've never seen Andre and Big Boy together. I've seen Big Boy solo, and so that just sentimentally was amazing to see them do some of their old things, to hear them say like, it's he and I until he die, you know, stuff like that, or like Spodioti Doublicious, even if their set itself was obviously not their greatest set they've ever done or the greatest set at Coachella. And so there were issues, but just personally to get to see them on stage, like it was worth it for me. And another one that I just loved was Future Islands. They just blew me away. I didn't know anything about them, but the front man, the guy who had the like viral video of him dancing and stuff, like he just loves it so much that he makes you love it. Like he was just so into their music and everything that you couldn't help but get into it. And so I went home and immediately bought one of their CDs. So
Nice.
Future Islands.
So what we talked a lot with our previous mysterious guest about the way that the festival has changed over the years. He's covered it for the last 7 or 8 years, and it was his opinion and a lot of other people's opinions that it's become more and more of the cool place to be rather than like a place where people go specifically for the passion of music. Did you experience that at all? Did you feel like people were there genuinely, or were there a lot of people just kind of there to provide a background for their selfies?
I think a lot of people are there because it's Coachella, but to me, that also sort of embodies LA and Southern California. And like, you know, in LA, anyone who's anyone, you know, there'll be an event and anyone who's anyone has to be there. Whether you're performing or partaking or just watching, like you have to just go be seen there. And so in that sense, I think Coachella kind of fits into, even though it's Indio out in the valley, but like, you know, the whole Southern California vibe, in the same way that Bonnaroo with their like folk and bluegrassy background and roots kind of relates to Tennessee and stuff. So I do see a lot of people who are just there like, oh, I need to go to Coachella this year, like so I can post on Instagram that I was there.
But you think it's like somewhat organic
But
to that?
yeah, I think that kind of fits in with the nature of LA. I mean, I don't know. I hope not to insult just everyone from Southern California.
Well, I am from LA originally,
Okay,
but
well, as a native,
you fucking asshole.
as a native San Franciscan, then of course we don't like Southern California. So
That's always been crazy to me, actually. A little bit of a side tangent, but I never knew about I'm not a sports guy, so like I don't follow baseball or anything like that, but
I never knew about the rivalry between Southern California and Northern California until I moved to Northern California. And then everybody was really serious about it. And I'm like, people in LA don't give a fuck, right?
Yeah, I think we probably take it a little more seriously up here.
Really? I always thought it was the other way around, that people in San Francisco didn't give a fuck. Like, the first time I went to Coachella, I almost got stabbed for playing Mac
Really?
Dre in the car.
What?
Yeah. And then
What?
they said some stuff about Oakland, and my friend from Oakland just kind of lost his
That's
his
bullshit
head, and-
talk.
Oh,
Yeah, no, I don't know.
Well, I mean,
Oh,
in
no.
my experience, it's like the perceptions that people have of LA are not what I grew up with. But then again, I left LA when I was out of high school. So I only experienced like the LA of natives, like people that were born and raised there, that went to school there and stuff like that. I never interfaced with like the adult world of LA where people came to like seek fame and stuff like that, and didn't have to deal with people like, waiting tables while they, hope to be the next whatever, so I never really saw that side of it. But, everyone talks about, oh, LA is very fake. Like everybody's, got plastic surgery and fake boobs and all that kind of stuff. And, that's not the LA that I grew up with. So, and I feel like it's such a small segment of LA. And then moving up to the Bay Area and hearing people talk about that so like emphatically, like they knew what LA was like and it was like this. Meanwhile, they couldn't see how people in the Bay Area themselves are very fake in a different way, I don't know if that is inflammatory, but like I feel like the Bay Area has this very like sort of ultra liberal like fake front where like even if that's not the way you really feel, you put on like that's how you feel because that is what the culture is, and everyone's like trying to be this like really, open-minded and, free person, even if they're not, I don't know. Something about that read as fake to me at the time, at least.
No, I know what you mean. And
But
I hate that I agree with you so much. Yeah, no, I see it too. And definitely every time I go down to LA, I see the slivers of what people think of it, but I also see so much more. I love LA. Like I've never dishoned it, to be honest.
I mean, I like it a lot more now that I'm not here. Hang on one second. You guys talk amongst yourself.
LA, I like it.
Are you
Yeah.
getting that
well,
check, or-
I also like to think that other states have rivalries, like.
Oh yeah,
But
definitely.
then California, we just rival ourselves.
Yeah, that's
So I like
that's
that.
true. That I do like that.
We don't rival other states. We just cut it in half and then north south by
Yeah, even the East and the West.
Well, I mean, now especially we're getting into like, we're kind of getting off topic here, but it's interesting to me. Like this podcast isn't about sticking to a certain topic, but the north-south divide of California and how much more pronounced that's going to become if things like this drought that we've been experiencing continue. One of the reasons I never moved back to LA is because I'm a little bit paranoid. I believe a certain number of conspiracy theories, definitely not all conspiracy theories, but, I'm pretty like, I'm a pretty skeptical person of everything. And although I really, when I visit LA now, I really am like, oh, I kind of want to like move back. I kind of want to experience this as an adult and whatnot. It's kind of changing. And for my entire life growing up, I always loved downtown LA, but downtown LA in the 80s and early 90s was nothing. It was completely abandoned, completely overrun by homeless people, and it was not a place to be. Nobody lived there. And now it's, it's possible to live there. And it's like, fuck, I always wanted to like be able to live in these cool buildings and this awesome area. But then I remember that LA has no water, like, which is a huge fucking thing. Like LA has no natural water supply. All the water is diverted from the Colorado River or from up north. And if you've seen the movie Chinatown, you know about how all this got started, kind of. But that was literally the thing that prevented me from moving back to LA. Is like, well, fuck, if the shit hits the fan, and if something crazy goes down, I don't want to be trapped in a fucking place where there's no water, like where millions upon millions of people all of a sudden are like having to fend for themselves in a post-apocalyptic type environment, you know? Like, let's say the power grid goes down or some shit, or like, you know, any number, a zombie attack happens. You never fucking know. I at least want to be somewhere where if I know that I can like hold up and fortify and make it through that initial like wave of people just looting, pillaging, and robbing. Eventually people are going to die of hunger, you know. At that point, I feel like it's a little bit easier to contend with, you know. But that initial point where, like, you know, you got millions of people just, you know, it's like the riots all over again.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the zombie apocalypse movies go down in LA also. Like, they always show LA crumbling first.
It's definitely not optimized for zombie apocalypse, I can tell you that much.
Though I think Skynet is in San Francisco, right?
I don't know if Skynet is in San
I think
Francisco.
it is.
I know Starfleet Academy is in San Francisco.
And that gets blown up.
It does. Well, in the
Yeah.
movie, yeah, it does.
Yeah. So no one's safe. That's
nobody's
what
safe.
you need to take away from this podcast. You're not safe.
But anyway, that's a little bit of a sidetrack between Northern and Southern California. But it's an interesting topic to me. Like, at what point are we going to have to address the fact that we've created this infrastructure that isn't sustainable, or, you know, it shouldn't exist, you know, and it's only a matter of time until we realize that it, or we are forced to come to terms with the fact that it shouldn't exist. But in a lot of ways, I guess, you know, in my stoner kind of mentality, it does relate to the stuff we talk about on this podcast, because that is the same thing that's happened to the music industry. It's the same thing that's happening to everything right now, is that we're realizing that the way things are shouldn't exist. They've been propped up by, you know, things that have kept them going that, you know, artificially in a lot of ways, you know. The record label industry propped up a lot of stuff that, like, really shouldn't have existed. And last week on the podcast, we, with Pro Fans, that's episode, sorry, that's not last week, week before last, episode 7 with Pro Fans, if you want to go check it out. We talked about whether or not the whole span of recorded music from, you know, let's say like 50s to late 90s was a bubble, essentially, that shouldn't have existed. Before that, artists couldn't release music in any way. There was no format really to release a product of your music. And having that option in the form of records or 8 tracks or CDs or cassettes or whatever created this bubble that was then contributed to by all the money coming in from labels and this whole system that built on top of this thing that probably shouldn't have existed in the first place, because now we're back to square one, where, like, you don't have a product to sell. As an artist, you know, you can't sell a CD anymore. So, you know, is this whole thing, you know, was it a big sham? You know, was it a big pyramid scheme that we're just now, like, realizing, oh, fuck, this can't stay like this forever? I don't know.
I think
Deep thoughts.
I think part of it was the rapid changing of technology and the art form, and I think it was very hard to keep up with and even harder to predict. And so I think that in some ways it probably, you know, was kind of like pyramid scheme-y or like scammy, you know, like some people probably knew that they were just kind of like propping something up, making a quick buck, and then who cares if it falls. But I think also it's just probably difficult to predict what was next. And there was no way that anyone in the 50s could have had any idea, even close, like what kind of stuff was going on now.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't predict Michael Jackson in the 50s, I mean, I guess you could you had Elvis or something like that, but even that's not even in the same realm. Like,
Yeah, and so I think that, probably a mix of some people just making a quick buck or you propping things up, doing that bubble kind of stuff, and some people just probably incapable of making the right calls. Like now it's easier to see who is which category, who is doing shady business, who made a wrong decision.
that's true, but still for some reason people don't, I don't know, I feel like people still buy into it, even though they know, like, that person's fucking me. I know they're fucking me, but I'm still going to give them my money so that they can continue to fuck me. It's that, to me, that's the craziest thing that we have to like really address as a culture, is like the fact that I don't know, man, like we are just, it's what is it, like Munchausen syndrome, where you like identify with the kidnapper or something?
The Stockholm?
Stockholm, yeah, that's
Stockholm
right, that's right.
syndrome.
It's, I don't know, I think it's kind of like that. Like everybody knows that the financial disaster happened, and it happened because people were, fucking you over, like fucking you out of your money so that they can make money, and they didn't give a fuck about you. They didn't give a fuck about anything. And they know who did it, and they still bank at Chase, or they still bank at Wells Fargo. They still they still support all of these businesses. They still vote Democrat and Republican. They still like do all the same shit. And I don't know if there's a way out of that, That's my like pessimistic side, is like, fuck, this is too crazy and people are too caught up. So caught up they can't even do what's right for themselves, I don't know. What do you guys think? Are you guys more optimistic than I am? I don't know. I hope so, because
As an artist and someone who's trying to make a career as a musician, you're really bumming me out. But yeah, I see it all the time, and I can't say I'm all that optimistic though. I wish I was, but I'm kind of in the regime of people who just kind of want to make, and just I try to stay really far away from. I get really tired of dealing with, bars and people who try to mash together artists that don't make sense just to have a show, instead of really trying to help the scene and like put together something where, if you come for that band, you're going to see a few other bands that you like and haven't heard before. And I think you're right. People are just really caught up in.
Yeah, I mean, I can't blame artists really, because nowadays we're living in this world where the artist has to do so much. Like they not only have to be the artist, but they have to be the promoter. They have to be the social media guru. They have to be the web designer. They have to be the record label. They have to be, they have to master their own all this shit that like you didn't have to contend with before. I mean, so I can't put any blame on the artist really. And that's the scariest thing, is that it's symptomatic of a larger issue that exists throughout our culture, that I don't know if we're to the point right now where people can really confront that scary truth, that like everything we thought we knew is kind of twisted in some way, or like we've been led astray in a lot of ways, like all the things we were raised to believe, 90% of that shit is not, it was an agenda that someone was like, pushing on you. And that's like a really fucking depressing thing to acknowledge. And it's really hard for people to internalize that it's not going to change unless we all collectively like do something about it. Everybody has this desire for things to change. Like I haven't met a whole lot of people lately that are like, oh, shit is great, I want it to stay exactly the way it is. Like everybody can kind of agree that like shit's fucked up. Like, in one respect or another, shit's fucked up. Like, we can't keep running businesses the way we do. We can't keep running a government the way we do. We can't keep, having a music industry like we're accustomed to in the past. It's just not sustainable. It doesn't work anymore. But it's really fucking hard to get people to like take it upon themselves to actually do something about it. It's really like one of the craziest things that I encounter. But I want to sort of, curb this discussion a little bit and move on to another conspiracy theory. This one is a little bit more aimed at Ben, but because this is a hip hop conspiracy. Have you heard about this Ben? The hip hop letter conspiracy
with the prison industrial complex and everything.
Yeah, have you heard about this? You read about it?
I've read it.
I've never heard this. Can you tell me?
No. All right. So I'll briefly summarize the conspiracy.
Do you like
here.
a flashlight under you?
Actually, you know what? I have the letter here, just in case someone didn't know. It's a kind of a long letter, but to summarize, several years ago, a lot of hip hop magazines, blogs, media outlets of all kinds got an anonymous email. And in this anonymous email, this person types, 2 pages this long about an experience that they had in like the early 90s where they were working in the music industry. They were at the top of their game and they were approached to come attend this meeting that was very clandestine. And they got to the meeting, a lot of other people in the industry there. Nobody knows what's going on. It's kind of eerie. And they sit down and somebody gets up in front of them and starts talking about a great business opportunity that they have. About how them and a lot of their colleagues have invested in this new concept of private prisons, prisons for profit, where the government pays you a stipend for each prisoner you keep in your private prison. And the basic setup was you as media tastemakers and purveyors of media have the ability to control the narrative of certain things that might create an environment where we can get more people into this system and make more money, and you guys can be invested in it. So you'll be making money off of the product you're putting out there, and that product will be furthering a cycle that leads to people becoming imprisoned. So basically the gist of what these people were saying was there's this kind of new thing called gangster rap going around. Maybe you've heard of NWA, Snoop Diggity Dog. It's this newfangled thing. And they talk about selling drugs. They talk about prostituting women. They talk about perpetrating crimes and carrying guns and all these things. And if we team up together and you keep perpetuating this type of music that encourages and glorifies a lifestyle that would lead to incarceration, you can be partially invested in our prison, and every person that comes through here, you're going to get paid for it. So you'll get paid for the music, that you're selling, and then you're getting paid for the result of that music. And this person, is writing 20 years later saying, I experienced this. It really fucking freaked me out. I didn't take part in it. I was not really into rap music in the first place. This didn't do anything to help me, grow towards it. Eventually I left the industry, but after all this time, I just see it getting worse and worse. And part of me just wanted to put this out there that I experienced this. Now, that's the setup. That's the letter. just saying, yo, this happened. This is the experience. I'm recounting it. That's it. They don't make any allegations against anyone personally, and they don't claim who they are. Obviously, they don't want to, get offed if this is really true. But that was the gist of it. And I think a few years ago, it might not have been as easy as it is now for people to digest the idea that this type of thing would even be possible, that people act in this way, that that people would create a conspiracy to do something like this. I don't know. What was your thought when you first heard about it, Ben? Did you actually read the letter?
Yeah, I received it.
Oh, they sent it to you
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I was running to Dwight.
Big time over here.
So I did receive that email. I don't know. There's a lot in there. My very short answer would be yes and no. There are plenty of truths in there. Prison industrial complex, these private prisons and things like that, and even within the last few years, I can think of a number of judges who were arrested for giving extra sentences and stuff like that because they were getting kickbacks from a prison nearby. So, especially with a lot of youth, people who didn't deserve sentences, they would just give them a year or something.
Yeah.
Or any year, they just give them 5 years.
Actually, just the other day, a judge in Pennsylvania was sentenced to, 28 years for doing this exact thing.
Yeah.
He was getting paid by a private prison, essentially and these were kids, like teenagers, young adults, and kids, that he was essentially getting paid to give them crazy sentences that would keep them in these prisons for as long as possible so that they could make the most money off of it. Very crazy.
Yeah. So I do believe that. I believe that prisons have no real intention of rehabilitation or anything like that. They don't seem like they're trying to prepare people for society and seem, a lot closer to terms like slavery and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, do I think that this meeting happened with these people where they all decided to promote gangster rap and get more people arrested? I'm not sure about that. I'm sure conversations of that nature took place, and outside of hip hop music, just mainstream pop culture is usually lowest common denominator. And so they're not choosing the highest intellectuals to go after with whatever they're going to be promoting wide scale. The Michael Bay movies are not promoting high values or anything like that. And so I feel like hip hop music probably received that same treatment as it became a way that they could make money and something that was growing in popularity. I'm sure that they saw that and said, oh, we can pump out the lowest common denominator hip hop music that appeals to this amount of people. Who cares if it's spreading negative values or if it's glorifying violence or drugs or any of these things? If that's what these people are interested in, then yeah, let's pump it to them. Or, even maybe not if they're interested, let's make them interested in this. They might have even gone that far too. But I don't know that conversation happened where record label executives bought shares of a prison and then went and signed DJ Quick or something like that.
DJ Quick is amazing, by the way.
Of course.
It doesn't promote that much thuggishness.
I was just trying to think
of
old NWA era type.
Yeah.
Like that.
But, well, here's to me where the issue gets a little interesting, shall we say. Would you, if someone told you 5 years ago that some guys in suits came to a judge with a briefcase full of money and said, yo, dog, if you send kids to our prison, we'll give you, however much for every one you send. That is going to seem far-fetched to people. That didn't fucking happen. There's no way that would happen. But that shit happened, for verifiable, that shit happened.
A lot of people don't even know that some prisons are run as private corporations.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people just think that all of them are run by the government. So some people don't realize that there are others making money off of running prisons and stuff.
Yeah. And I I think it was maybe last year or the year before, American Apparel used to be, they used to produce the United States Army uniforms. Like they had the contract to do that. They were an American company. Everything was made in the U.S. And that was like a big prideful point. They don't anymore because they lost that contract to a private prison that has prison labor creating these uniforms for a fraction of the cost, essentially slave labor.
Yeah, sure.
And a lot of people don't even know that this is going on.
I had no idea.
I didn't know that either. That's really sad.
Our, military uniforms are essentially now produced by slaves. They took the contract away from like made in America, people that actually paid, their whole thing is we pay people fair wages, we employ, we make everything here, et cetera, et cetera. Very, very crazy world we live in. But I don't know, I'm kind of with you where it's like, all right, well, I don't know if this actually happened the way this person is saying it did. I think it probably did happen, just because like as I get older and I see the way shit happens, like, and I see how easy it is to like get away with shit, where most people dismiss a lot of conspiracy theories, quote unquote, because they can't conceptualize how something like that would be able to be pulled off, like how could you keep it a secret? How come somebody didn't talk, blah, blah, blah. But that's bullshit because that shit happens all day, every day. There's shit that people stay tight-lipped about for their entire lives. And, there have been on, I think our second podcast, we talked to Robbie Martin a lot about conspiracy type stuff. And, we talked about the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office, which was a government intelligence bureau like the CIA that did mostly like satellite reconnaissance that existed for 30 years in complete secrecy. Nobody knew about this government agency for 30 fucking years. Not until they came out and publicly acknowledged it. I mean, there was a few like hints here and there, people, trying to blow the whistle, but the general public had no idea. They had buildings, they had fucking staff, they had all this shit, and nobody knew. So the idea that like you wouldn't be able to pull off something like that, to me, that doesn't ring true. But that people who subscribe to this theory, I think, simplify it a little bit because obviously that's not the whole story. Like the drug war is a huge, huge, huge factor in this situation in putting away tons and tons of young people, especially from the inner city, especially people of color, that, to sort of say that, oh, it's, it's all gangsta rap, like influencing the mind of young, impressionable teenagers into a life of hooliganism, like, that's only part of it. But I think these people who are making these kind of decisions to make money in this way, like not giving a fuck about anyone else, they're down to do shit like that, like they're totally down to like team up with their buddies and fucking, do some shit that subjugates people, like, or use the power of media to twist things in their favor. That's an old trick, that's politics. But I don't know. I mean, I think you look at the hip hop scene today, and it's clear, and it may just be lowest common denominator. I mean, I have problems with that argument simply because, in my experience, people don't like the lowest common denominator. Like the most successful shit in all media is always like some shit that is created by an artist that is like their passion project. Like, I always reference the shit that I like, like Terminator. You know, James Cameron as a filmmaker, like he made Titanic. That shit made the most money ever. But that was his like fucking geek project. Like he grew up as a kid being obsessed with this ship and like being obsessed with movies and all this shit. And he made this project from his heart and he risked his own money. And it wasn't this big commercial, you know, Michael Bay type shit. And people responded to it. They fucking loved it. I didn't like it, but they loved it, you know? But like, you know, that's true of most things that like exceptionally popular, is that it was something that the people involved with it were like super adamant about making a really good movie or album or whatever. So like, to me, the rationale that, oh, we just have to appeal to the lowest common denominator in order to make money is like, that's not true. Like, that may be the way that you can do it with the least amount of risk, but that's not like, you know, that's not the way to do it.
Yeah, I don't think that they feel that they have to. I see it as more just they're like,
They
which
want
way
to.
can we, which
Yeah.
way can we like pump the most things out, you know?
Yeah.
Like if they're gonna search for passion projects each time, that's gonna take a lot more care and stuff. You know.
Well, I mean, you look at like the biggest artists in hip hop right now. Kanye West aside, who, you know, came up. You know, he wasn't just like, he's not like Rick Ross, who like came out of nowhere, like signed to a big label, and then like, you know, you're propped up by this machine, whether or not like you have the authenticity to back it up or anything. But that's not, you know, that's not the only example. You know, you have a lot of artists that are propped up that didn't like blow up on like the mixtape circuit or something like that and then develop an organic fan base. Like they were found by labels or whatever who thought they could exploit something here, and they're like putting all the money and power behind these people, and it's not an organic process. But all of these people who get found and created and manufactured in these ways are all talking about the same kind of shit, like ignorant ass shit, you know. And maybe that's just, you know, lowest common denominator, but like, I don't know. There are so many talented artists out there that like, to step over them to get like a, you know, not even as talented artist that's talking about bullshit. I mean, it kind of shows to me like that it's all a game. So like, why wouldn't that game be, you know, to maximize the amount of profits they can get? I don't know. Like how do you, as a fan of hip hop, are you able to enjoy like the more mainstream stuff that you know, like, you know, Rick Ross was a prison security guard, you know, I'm assuming you know who the real Freeway Ricky Ross was.
Yeah.
You know, like that the story that Rick Ross claims is not, that didn't happen to him.
Yeah. Well,
But
Rick
are you
Ross-
still able to enjoy his music?
Yeah, I mean, Rick Ross is not my personal favorite. You
Yeah.
know, I don't like his music too much. I do think he's the best method actor of all time. I mean, that guy's never broken character. Like, he is just always in it. He might believe it himself.
Maybe, yeah.
But so, you know, some of those guys, I can still enjoy their music or in certain situations and things like that. Especially with, I think it's funny because in hip hop, authenticity has always been a very important trait. Maybe, I guess, just in art in general, other genres too. But, you know, in hip hop, authenticity and like how real you are has always been so important. And that is clearly not the case with this like mainstream stuff, as you're pointing out. You know, with guys like Rick Ross. And so I don't know. It is interesting to me. I like to see, as someone who both likes the music and is interested in business in the music industry, it's very interesting for me to watch who these labels sign and things and why they do it or what they have planned. You know, I see guy like Krayshawn, that girl from Oakland.
Right,
She
yeah.
gets like $1 million advance, and like Chief Keef from Chicago gets these like huge advances.
who are you?
Yeah, and it's just I don't understand at the time why they do it, and then with those two, both of their albums sold like 10,000 or something like that,
Yeah.
and
And
they're
now I
never
think
gonna.
Krayshawn has a baby or something, and Chief
I mean,
Keef has a sentence.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, neither of them are ever going to pay off their advance or anything.
Yeah.
I mean, and so at the time I was very perplexed, and now it clearly didn't pay out. And it is weird to see that kind of stuff, like who greenlights something like that, where it's like seems so obviously not going to work out, and then it doesn't work out. Like they didn't prove me wrong. So like it is interesting to watch that stuff, and it is hard to support some labels or some mainstream acts
Yeah.
for that reason.
I mean, I just think of something like, I don't know, some of my favorite rappers are from Alabama. Huntsville, Alabama has a huge, amazing hip hop scene. Some of the best rappers you'll ever hear. Like, I think, the next Outcast, in terms of like talent is G-Side. And I mean, these are like really, really talented artists that like make their own beats. They have their own sound. They rap about their real lives. It's not like necessarily like backpacker shit or something like that. It's like, it's real. It's like if they sold drugs, they talk about how they sold drugs. If they want to get out of selling drugs, they talk about that. There's one guy, Christmas, who raps about, working at the cell phone store because, he's not about that kind of shit. He's about having a real job, But it's just shocking to me that all of these people have been completely ignored by, the culture at large in the hip hop scene. But you have someone like Gucci Mane who, I like some Gucci Mane songs, I'm not going to lie. But all in all, like, this guy is fucking crazy, probably has mental illness, like, is a drug addict, and is not really rapping about anything. Like, why are you giving this guy, or why are you rewarding this guy when there's people out there who are very talented, who can actually contribute some excellent stuff that could touch people and make some money? And you're just totally like oblivious to the fact that they even exist. I don't know. I mean, shit like that to me is like, and I get that there's not like an industry like there used to be where you can take a chance on an artist and nurture them or whatever. But there are a lot of these people, they don't need no nurturing. They just need somebody to like put their shit out there. And then a lot of times I'll play some of the shit that I'm into for my friends, and they are floored. They're like, what the fuck is this? And you got to give it to me. I'm like, dude, this song is like 8 years old and it's from a random mixtape, and they can't believe that they've never heard this before. Like, how could you not, how could this not be famous? Like, how can this not be popular? So it just makes me wonder, like, what the real motivations are behind this kind of shit. If you're not signing people for their talent, and you're not signing people necessarily for their ability to make money for you, like, like you mentioned with Krayshawn, like, everybody knows, looking at Krayshawn, before you even hear her open her mouth, this bitch is not going to be the next big thing. Like, it's going to be such a limited niche of people that are going to be into this. This is not going to be like, she ain't got an ass like Iggy Azalea, she doesn't have colorful wigs like Nicki Minaj and a cartoony rapping style. So like, obviously it's not like, ooh, cash cow. So what's the motivation?
I think maybe the labels were kind of scrambling to get to the online sensation and the whole like hip hop blogs and things. And so I think they had heard of a lot of musicians coming up online, and how blogs are kind of breaking records more than radio. And so it seemed like they had like heard that and they're like, oh, who's like big online? And they just got like, you know, Chief Keef's video was big online, or like Krayshawn's video was big online, where someone who is actually following their buzz or like following their come up and shows that they're feeling like knew that they didn't have the strong supporting that other online artists had. So it kind of seemed like that, like the labels were just like, oh, we heard online artists are really big now, and they just like grabbed the two off the top, which were not the two best or even the two most popular. And now I think a lot of labels, what they're doing is they see that you have a buzz going online, that you're, at least in hip hop, and then they sign you and pretty much do nothing for you. Like they'll sign you and then you are just on their label. You have to continue doing everything on your own as if you're independent. And then if you can reach that next level, then they already kind of had rights to you. So like I see a lot of that happening too, where guys will link deals, but like the label has no intention of putting out an album anytime, or like might not even be fronting them very much money or paying R and anything. They might just kind of stash an artist, keep going on your own. If you start filling up shows, then we'll like bump you up to the next venue and pump a single to radio or something.
Is it kind of like we're going to buy you so no one else can?
Yeah, I think so. I think they just see guys who are starting to make moves, and so they give them a contract and they don't have to invest money or time in them. And then like if that artist continues to blow up, well then they already have them on their roster, and for probably a not very good deal, because when they signed it, they didn't know about the music industry, or they were like didn't have a lot of labels courting them or stuff like that. And so and then if they never make it to the next level, then they'll just drop them in a year or two. I see a lot of that stuff happening too, in hip hop at least.
As a blogger, and the trend has been obviously like music is moving away from physical products. Nobody's buying CDs. Some people are still buying vinyl, but you know, that's a fraction of the overall music listening crowd. What do you think is the future of consuming music, and how, you know, for fans and for artists, like how do artists make a dollar in this day and age? You know, obviously through touring and stuff like that, but is there a way in your mind, as someone who, you know, inadvertently contributes to the fact that people don't want to pay for shit anymore, you know, because they can go on a blog and listen to whatever they want, and they can go download it or whatever, or they have Spotify and they don't need to download anything. They can just listen to whatever they want when they want. How do we restructure this to be beneficial for everybody, so that, well, obviously you're not going to get to a point where you convince people to pay $20 for a disc of songs anymore. Like, I don't see that ever happening again. But is there a way? Is there like a middle ground?
Well, in terms of how we consume music, I see us moving a lot toward, like you mentioned, Spotify. Like, it really seems like these subscription services are what everyone is going to want, which personally I do not like a subscription service for myself. I like the act of owning music and like having music that I can do what I want with it. And so I'm one of the few that goes out and buys physical copies of CDs and stuff.
CDs
still.
or vinyl or what?
CDs.
God damn, man.
Well, I've never had any turntable. I was born in '89, so my first music were on tapes, and I switched to CDs, and I'm not gonna switch again.
Oh shit.
So, but I still like to look through the booklet, read liner notes. The artwork is still part of the whole thing for me. It's not just what I'm listening to, so I still enjoy that. But for making money, I mean, we'll have to find a way to pay the artist fairly for these subscription services, because it still sounds like the things like Pandora and Spotify and everything are still not paying the artist that much. Like, it doesn't sound like anyone can make a living off of their streams. I don't know. I hear artists, you know, they're getting like 10 billion streams on Spotify, and they'll get, you know, a couple
$1.
thousand. Yeah. Like even a couple $1,000, like they're like, yeah, that's good, but like we had 10 billion people listen to our music. Like I would like to be able to capitalize on 10 billion people listening, a little more than, you know, whatever, a couple grand that Spotify is going to kick back, and that's for the top artists. That's not for any independent artists. Those guys getting some check for like 70 cents. And so I think that we'll have to find out a way to pay the artists for these online streams and stuff. And otherwise, I see a lot of artists, like, I agree, recorded music does not have much monetary value. Like, people are just not willing to pay $10, $20 for recorded music. But I think what they will do is they will pay $20 to support an artist that they care about and that they like. And so I don't know if you've heard of Nipsey Hussle. He's a rapper.
Yeah.
And recently he sold his mixtape for $100.
Oh, like
And
like the Wu-Tang kind of thing where it's a
Yeah.
single.
Well, like he sold he it was $100, and then he did a tour where if you had the $100 mixtape, you got to come to a meet and greet and you had a
okay.
ticket to the concert. And but so he sold like, I don't know, 1,000 or something like that to all of his fans. Like he knew that he could hype this up. He could say like, are you a real fan of mine? Like, are you willing to pay? Like, I know $100 is a lot, but I'm going to come meet you. I'll give you an autograph. I'm going to perform for you. You get my music. And so it made it a point of like, oh, I'm not paying $100 for his mixtape. I'm paying $100 because I'm a Nipsey Hussle fan. And so I see potential there for artists to make that connection, to establish that like, when you buy something, you're not just paying for like any of those one items.
Right.
You're pretty much just paying for my career. And like, I'm always putting money into studio time and all of that stuff. And then you guys, and I'll just release things. Sometimes they're for free. Sometimes I ask you to pay. And pretty much you guys just constantly put money into me, and I just invest it into my career, kind of thing.
That's to me, that's one of the more interesting ideas that people have put forth, is that in order to repair this sort of broken system right now where artists can't really make any money, like, there's the argument that you got to get to a certain point before you can start asking people for $100. You have to have a catalog of music for people to be willing to make that investment. But I mean, that's to me, that's a little bit more authentic in a way, to put forth the idea that you're not paying for a product, you're not paying for this song, you're paying so that I can make this music for you to enjoy. Like you're supporting me so that I can make the music that brings some kind of value to your life, and taking the sort of commodity out of it. I think that's an interesting concept that I haven't heard a lot of people bringing up. I hear a lot of people saying, oh, well, artists can tour and they can sell merch and all this kind of stuff, and that's how they'll make their money. And that might be true, but that's not right for everybody. There are some artists that aren't live artists, some shit you can't really perform like that. Or some people just, they're not that person, And I think if we start pushing more and more towards this world where like the artist is expected to be a businessman and a marketer and a promoter and all this stuff at the same time, while there are certain things that are good about it, instilling hustle in people and whatnot, but the other side of it is like, there's what about the artists that like are outsiders? What about the people that can't fit into that, where like their brain just simply doesn't work in a business capacity at all, but they're an artistic genius, Like, are we going to live in a world where like that just can't exist anymore because we've created this paradigm where you got to be businessman artist, But I think that is an interesting thought, that one of the things artists can do is change the game and redefine what it is that people are paying for. And I think with crowdfunding and stuff like that, that's possible now where maybe it wasn't in the past.
I don't know what are your thoughts on this, Phil? As a musician, what are the pros and cons of this new paradigm?
I actually really agree with you. I think that we're going to end up pushing out a lot of brilliant people by needing artists to also be businessmen or businesswomen. I mean, I know I probably fit into that. Like, why should I like bust my ass like trying to get people to listen to my music when I'm perfectly happy just writing my music and recording it and just working on my craft because it's what I like to do. You know, I know other brilliant people who are just like that, who we like to make and we'll play for people, but we don't have that, because there's that, you have to have the drive to not just like play your shows, but to also put up with the people who really make it hard. You know, the bookers that don't care about anything except for, you know, how much draw you're going to bring, which I understand. I totally understand that you need, you know, the venue has to make some money too, but there's more. I think there's more to it. There's like helping out the scene, making sure that there's a backbone, you know? And I think there's a lot of people who don't have that, don't have the full voice because they just don't know how. Like, I'll be honest, I don't know how to be a businessman.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's no correlation. There's no reason that any creative artist should be able to be a businessman. Like, those aren't overlapping skills. Plenty of them can do both, but there's, you know, I think it's unreasonable to expect a creative person, just because they can make music or something, that they can also be a businessman or a manager or, you know, a publicist or anything. I think is unreasonable. But,
Yeah. I think it's a slippery slope when you, because there's a lot of people out there who I'm sure would be like, oh, I'm an artiste. Why should I have to do such things? Blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like, but to a certain extent, you do have to like do some shit, you know?
Definitely.
Unless you are just incapable for whatever reason of doing shit, like you have some kind of mental faculty that prevents you from, you know, being a social person, that's fine. You can't really overcome that. But like, there's this stigma with being an artist where it's like you are labeled as lazy, and like, I think you should fight that to a certain extent and actually try to go out there and have some hustle. You know, I think that's an important side of things. And to me, that's why hip hop is very inspirational to me, because it's all about people that are trying to get creative and figure out ways to like have a way to make some fucking money, or like, you know, do something, like acknowledging that nobody's going to hand you anything and nobody gives a fuck about you until you can do something for them, and deciding that, you know, I'm going to take this into my own hands and I'm going to go out there, I'm going to sell tapes out of my trunk until I have enough money to press a CD, and then I'm going to sell those out of my trunk, and then once I have enough money, maybe I'll buy, you know, a nice chain, and then I'll just keep doing my thing, and I'll have made something out of nothing, you know? Like, I think that's an important thing for artists to have. But we also have to acknowledge that not everybody is capable of doing that, and it doesn't mean that they don't have something to contribute as an artist. I don't know, it is a very slippery slope, though.
Well, hopefully the artists who can't do the business stuff, or, you know, who can't do any one aspect, can hopefully surround themselves with people who can, you know, and that's what the team is for. And, you know, maybe if you can't afford a manager or a booking agent, you find someone who wants to become a manager or who wants to become a booking agent, and you guys like learn and grow together, you know. Or if you're already booking some shows, then you find whatever your level of manager or booking agent or publicist or anyone. And so hopefully you can make a team to kind of fill in any spots that you're missing yourself as an artist.
Now, Phil, are you into hip hop music at all?
I love hip hop. I'm not really in the scene though. I don't listen to a lot of it. I mean, mostly through my housemates, but I'm more of a shoegaze kind of indie shit kind of kid. Yeah.
It's all good. We don't discriminate around here. I only ask because, you know, obviously we're having a very hip hop centric discussion right now, although I think all of these things do
The problems in all the
overflow.
scenes, though.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not just hip hop.
it's
for sure.
common stuff, but I think there's a lot of genres of music or scenes of music where people just seem to kind of stand around and complain that stuff isn't happening for them. And to me, I don't only listen to hip hop, obviously, but like I respect and admire a lot of hip hop, especially like the artist that I was talking about from Huntsville. Everybody go check out Paper Route Gangstas, G-Side, Christmas, all these guys from Huntsville, Alabama. They're fucking amazing. The beats are sick. Block Beatas is the production team. And Jackie Chain, you know. You got to get multi-ethnic in there. But I admire the fact that these are people that aren't complaining about shit. They're trying to find a solution for it, and they're looking at the tools they have around them. It is business minded in a lot of ways. You're like looking at your assets and you're leveraging them to get somewhere where you want to be. I feel like that's something that's really important that gets lost a lot of times. Like bands, they seem to like want shit to just happen for them. They think that just because they're making good music that people should give a fuck, or, you know, they should support them, or that shit should be happening for them. They should be getting signed or whatever. But that, you know, nobody gives a fuck about you unless you can do something for them. Nobody gives a fuck. And you got to give them a reason to give a fuck. You know, and to me, that's one of the major lessons of hip hop, is that you got to make people give a fuck about you. And whether that's like you telling them how awesome you are, or, you know, being a little bit more subtle with it, that's like what, you know, 95% of hip hop is about, is like, this is me. This is why I'm hot. This is why you should care. This is why you should support me. I don't know. It's a wise lesson.
Yeah, it's interesting because I definitely like a lot of hip hop. You know, it's like bragging and boasting, and there's very competitive nature to it. But I just haven't that thought exactly, or your wording has not occurred to me, and so it's definitely interesting to hear that. I agree though. I do like that message, and I've never justified that like kind of bravado in the way of just it's like, you need to give a fuck about me, like here's why. I like that though.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of shit about hip hop that I think a lot of people don't really like intellectualize in a way, you know? Like what I refer to as the hood mentality, like, which is where I come from, like, in terms of like where my mind is at, is the mind of someone that came up, you know, in somewhat of the hood, where like shit is not great, you know, it is what it is. Like, yeah, my car's fucked up. I can't afford a Beamer. I got this fucking minivan, but fuck it. I'm gonna like make this minivan the dopest fucking minivan you've ever seen. I'm gonna have candy paint on this motherfucker. I'm gonna have big rims. Gonna be nice rims. I'll put a stereo system in the back. It's going to have lights. It's going to have a PS3 inside. PS4 now, I guess. Oh, yeah. It's what the kids are playing. But, you know, it's like the idea that, like, fuck that. Like, I don't, you know, I can make the best of what I have here and make you want what I have, rather than, like, you know, trying. And there's a contradiction, because a lot of times people are striving for that more, like, conformist recognition, like that one day I am going to be able to buy a caddy or whatever, you know, like, but at the same time it's like, well, fuck, I'm gonna make this minivan so dope, you're gonna want this fucking minivan. And like, to me, that's the mentality you should have, like, not just like, oh, if I just had this, then, you know, shit would be all right for me, or if I could just accomplish this first, then I'll be happy, or if I can make this amount of money. And that's the lesson that I've in my life that I've taken away from listening to so much hip hop, from everything from gangsta rap, quote unquote, to backpacker shit and instrumental hip hop and more abstract shit like Anticon and stuff like that. Like, it's all very different, but in a lot of ways, like, the same core values is, it doesn't matter what you have, it doesn't matter where you come from, like, say what you have to say and convince me why I should pay attention. That's, to me, the deepest shit about hip hop, is that it's, it's ultimately a positive thing for people involved if you're viewing it in the right way. It's easy to get caught up in shit. It's easy to get caught up in the superficial aspect of it, and a lot of people do. But I think the people that really transcend that understand that, like, it's not about that side of it. It's about improving your life, like, with the tools that you have.
Get into some deep philosophy about hip hop. I
Dude.
like this. I feel like I need to go listen to hip hop now.
Deep thoughts, man. That's the, like, subtitle of this podcast. But no, I mean, you should check out. I'll send you some shit to listen
Please
to.
do. Yeah,
Like,
please.
It's because there are people out there. I think a lot of people do get turned off by the shit that is perpetuated through the mainstream, and they develop these ideas of what hip hop is, and it's not an accurate picture. Like, because, as we mentioned before, this is a construct of a corporation that's trying to make the most money they can, and they happen to, like, realize that people like ignorant shit, and white kids in the suburbs buy shit that is glorifying ghetto life, quote unquote. So they just churn it out, and that's not what hip hop is. That's and I don't want to get into, like, real hip hop versus fake hip hop, because that's
Well,
semantics.
I do think another reason people are so quick to write off hip hop is that it is an African American, a black art form in a black culture. And so as hip hop made it to mainstream American culture, I think a lot of people felt threatened, honestly, to have black culture, to have this black music in the mainstream, have it become a part of American culture. And I don't think, even when hip hop music has been mainstream for 20 years, like, it's not American culture still. It is still black culture. And so I think that leads a lot of people to write it off, or to want to write it off, and to want to just say, oh, look, it's superficial, to take, like, the first thing that they can grab and say, this is why I don't listen to it, is because it's all about material things. Whereas really they want to write it off, and they're looking for a reason. Like, Ice-T was in a metal band.
Yeah, Body Count.
What's Body Count? Yes, yeah, and they had a song "Cop Killer," which was very controversial, obviously.
Yeah.
And he was constantly labeled as the rapper Ice-T. Cop Killer was constantly labeled as a rap song. And there's, like, if you're defining hip hop of all characteristics, like, none of those characteristics were evident in Cop Killer. It was like thrash, like, speed metal. He's, like, screaming guitars, like, all that stuff. And it was a violent, controversial song, which you can have problems with that message. It's fine. But, like, it got a lot of attention, and it was always painted as a hip hop song, or that Ice-T was the rapper, even though he would constantly say, like, this is my side metal project. But no one would, they weren't willing to look into that first thing to write it off. They could.
They're getting back together, by the way. Body
Really?
Count. Yeah, they're gonna do another album. Yeah.
Ice-T's coming back
Now-
from Law and Order.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
from
finished
Law
Law and
and
Order, and now he's doing
He's
Cop Killer
coming
again.
back to Body
Yeah.
Count.
Very strange. But what you just said was actually pretty spot on. Is that there's a level of racism that exists in our culture that a lot of people aren't comfortable with addressing, and they aren't comfortable acknowledging that they have those thoughts, you know, and they might write it off as, you know, something completely, oh, I don't, you know, I don't like it because of what it stands for, or like because they objectify women or talk about drugs or whatever like reason you pinpoint for not liking a certain genre of music that is very varied. Because not everybody's talking about
Right.
hoes, and not everybody's talking about selling drugs and shooting people. Like,
And you can find drugs, misogyny, crime in all kinds of genres
Oh, yeah.
and stuff like that. You know, some music has
Yeah.
a positive message and some does not have a positive message.
and not everything should have a positive message,
Yeah.
because not everything is fucking peachy keen in this world.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fucked up shit that goes on, and a lot of times the only way you can call attention to the fucked up shit is by taking it out of context and showing it to people in a different way. And then they start to be able to break it down themselves and say, oh, fuck, this shit is fucked up. You know, that's, I mean, we say we're talking about like deep philosophy here, but really it's like, you know, we're talking about pretty base level shit. But like,
Shallow philosophy.
yeah, but I mean, I think racism has a huge factor in it. And I mean, I have to disagree with you on a certain point that hip hop culture is, I don't think hip hop culture is black culture anymore. I think hip hop culture, although a lot of people still might have that correlation, it's mainstream culture. Like, hip hop culture has become normal, you know, pretty much everything around us has been influenced by hip hop in one way or another, from the way people dress to the way people talk to the way music sounds to the to different styles of dancing and art and all this shit. Like, a lot of it has trickled into our culture in very obvious and not so obvious ways. But there is still this seed of like people not being able to acknowledge the fact that they have racial prejudices that are contributing to a bias they have on a certain subject. Because you look around now and it's obviously, like I just said, hip hop is not just black culture anymore.
And
I'd say
I
a
do,
majority
right.
of like hip hop fans are not African American now.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, I was born in '89, like I said, and so I grew up. Hip hop existed my whole life. I started listening when I was 10 years old, but so most of my life I listened to hip hop, and so I grew up on it, and so I feel that it's a part of the culture. But I do think that it's perceived still by many, you know, as a black culture, and in doing so, they are threatened by it.
So what do you think as a hip hop fan of the racial disparity in hip hop, where like now a lot of the more mainstream shit, you are seeing a lot more white people in hip hop getting really, really popular. And I'm not saying that it's not without merits. Like, obviously someone like Macklemore is like, you know, a very talented person and they should get recognition. But that's not always, you know, the case. There are a lot of people who arguably are getting popular because of the color of their skin
And
or the way they work.
I think Macklemore would be the first to point out that he has received a lot of benefits because he's white. You know, I do think he's talented, but there is also a huge level of like, oh, a white guy that's rapping who's marketable. Like, this is, you know, we'd rather promote him than this other guy, you know, this black guy who's not as marketable to mainstream America. And like Macklemore talks about how he's considered like this very wholesome rapper, you know, like everyone's like, oh, Macklemore, like family friendly, very wholesome guy because of his songs like Same Love and Thrift Shop and stuff. But like in Thrift Shop, he cusses a lot, you know, he's pointed that out. Like he's like, I cuss my ass off in here, but because I'm white and it's about Thrift Shop, then it's like, oh, this wholesome guy, you know. He says like, "What up? I got a big cock." In that line, you know? Like that's not wholesome at all.
Right. No.
But he's still like, "Oh yeah, my kids can listen to him. Like that's fine."
Do you think like once your generation starts having kids and people like you, me, Phil are passing down our values, do you think that that's going to change? Do you think that, at least in the music industry, that will transcend this current state?
I hope so. Hip hop is so young that like now the founders are now just having kids, and like their kids are kind of getting to that age of where the founders were when they made it. But so, or, founders and the founding fans, like across the board.
Right, yeah.
And so, but now we have like our first generation of hip hop parents, like when hip hop was being founded, then obviously all the parents hated it. Like they never heard anything like it and stuff like that. And so now it's more acceptable for the first time to that generation of parents. And then when my generation has kids, or like younger than me has kids, then all of a sudden grandparents will be open to hip hop and stuff. It'll be a much older genre. And so I'd like to think that it's moving in those directions, and that once we're 2-3 generations into it, that it'll be a lot more open. Yeah, I hope so.
Here's an interesting thing, because from the very start of this podcast, I think one of the first things from my life that I brought to the podcast that I've been talking about for for years, but it's become sort of a theme in the podcast, is that white people destroy everything they love. just by loving it, they ultimately destroy it. And you can look at, it's examples all day and night of things that somebody, and I say white people because it does come out of the European culture more frequently than a lot of other places, but not just white people, obviously, but white people are the primary beneficiaries of this system. And in a lot of cases, just being into something and being so into it that you want to impose yourself onto it, and you want to make it bigger and better, and oh yeah, let's do this, let's take it to the next level, and we can make tons of money, let's make the fucking money, let's do this shit. And then before you know, the thing that you loved about it is completely eroded, and it's become this other entity that is so far removed from what you fell in love with. And we've talked about this in terms of the culture of San Francisco, the fact that people move out here for a reason. They have this image of San Francisco in their head. They have always heard about free love and the culture that's come out of here, the music, the art scene, the subcultures, and all that shit, the architecture. They're drawn to that. And by coming here and saying, oh well, I love this city so much, I just want to open up my own cafe here, and it's going to have reclaimed wood and Edison bulbs, and it's going to have what do you call the fucking fancy coffee, blue bottle coffee, and it's going to have all this amazing shit. It's going to be so cool. But meanwhile, the act of just doing that is contributing to the overall destruction of what you were drawn to in the first place. You're pricing out all the artists that drew you to the city, all the culture, all of that is gone simply by you loving it so much that you just had to have it, So I think we saw this happen with rock music. Rock music, a lot of people seem to forget that rock music was black music. Everybody thinks about Elvis, but he didn't start rock and roll. It's
it came out of the black community. And you have artists like Little Richard and Chuck Berry that, were doing this shit authentically, that white people just sort of started like getting really fucking into, to the point where like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to, put my own thing on it. And eventually it got to the point, like, I'd say like in the 80s, where like it became a fucking joke. Like, mainstream rock music became this fucking like commodity, and you had like hair metal bands and like just this awful fucking shit that was like so far removed from what you fell in love with that, I mean, you can't even really consider it the same thing. So to bring this long ass tangent back to the point, do you think that's going to happen in hip hop, Ben? Do you think there's going to be a day where it's like the majority of hip hop artists are white people, and you got like white people in fucking like, Native American outfits with face paint and just like taking it to the craziest fucking levels because, everything legitimate has already been explored,
Like Flock of Seagulls haircuts in hip hop.
Yeah. Like, can you see that happening?
Are we gonna ruin hip hop? Is what he's asking.
I do see hip hop splintering into a lot of subgenres, and I feel like in the way that rock music did, like it was just like rock and roll for a long time, and then eventually it became so diverse that you couldn't call everything rock and roll anymore, and so it had to be like, I don't know, metal or all the different variations, and so I think that is starting to happen to hip hop, and so maybe down the road there might be some sort of weird subgenres of hip hop, some sort of hair hip hop, or whatever it is.
I want to see hair hip hop. I'm already thinking of Pharrell's hat. Yeah.
Yeah. Some people would say that our hip hop's fashion right now is pretty nuts,
Pretty
and
ridiculous.
especially compared to hip hop. I mean, hip hop has always had this fashion element to it,
Yeah.
and there's always been a like what's cool in hip hop. And so some people probably just inherently find that ridiculous that other people get to tell you what fashion is cool, or that like everyone dressed the same is cool. But dismissing that, I'd say that this fashion right now is pretty ridiculous in comparison to the stuff that hip hop has always worn. And there have been some pretty weird phases anyway. But even right now, skirts and stuff are, I don't know, it's pretty bizarre and pretty anti a lot of like the earliest hip hop stuff. Like, I don't think they would have been too down, but that was also 40 years ago, so times change.
I don't know. Grandmaster Flash was pretty fucking fly in his like leather jean jacket, no shirt on, That was out there. I mean, if someone wore that today, they'd be like, what the fuck is this guy wearing? That's crazy.
It's true. When Run DMC was wearing their all Adidas tracksuit with Adidas shoes with no laces, like that was pretty crazy too. And they made it work. So maybe these skirts will catch on. I hope not.
Are you able to sort of like are you able to give unconventional hip hop artists a chance, like in your own mind, like, or are you going into it with bias? Like if you like see a blog post and like you see the thumbnail image and it's, a hippie looking white girl, let's just say, are you able to like give that a solid like listen to on its own merits? Or are you like, this fucking bitch, like this is about to suck?
I might not have high expectations, but I'll try and be open. And like for my site, I get a lot of stuff sent to me, and I listen to everything that is sent my way. And so, I'm definitely open to that. And I get some like really, really terrible submissions that make me want to not open another email ever again. But then I continue to listen and stuff. And I try not to let those things sway me. But I'm not going to say that appearance has nothing to do with it. Like,
It can definitely take you out of it. I feel like it can.
yeah. Well, and I don't know. I mean, and that can also impact your music. Like if you look one way and you're making music that gives off a different impression or something, like that could definitely, not even like race or gender or whatever, but like if you make this like really dark, like sad music and then you're dressed and you look really happy all the time, like that would be weird. And so you're definitely, your appearance and your whole vibe goes into how I absorb the music. And like another artist performing your exact same song might be a lot better, or it might be worse.
So Ben, you spent some time in South Korea, right?
I did, correct. 1
How
year.
how long were you there? You were there a year.
Yeah,
And when did you come back?
in October.
All right, so you've been back for a while, like going and living immersed in another culture for that long. Not that crazy different of a culture, but a different culture, like, and coming back, what sometimes looking at something with a fresh perspective, like lets you see things that you never saw before, like, or interpret things in a way you might not have before. Coming back to the US, like, and, re-immersing yourself, what were some of the things that really stood out to you coming back? Like, it's a tough question, but like, you know, I don't know, because when I've spent time out of the country and come back, a lot of times I'll see like how silly certain customs we have are, or like how I'll give you an example. Like when I was in Amsterdam, there was this really like weird vibe that like was really obvious to me, especially coming from the Bay Area, where like everybody was riding bikes. Like, I don't know, in San Francisco, the fact that everyone is riding a bike like really annoys me for some reason. But like in Amsterdam, everybody's riding a bike, or walking, and it's all very chaotic. Like, but somehow there's like this like calm acceptance from people, like that I accept the fact that this shit's going to be crazy and I'm not going to get bent out of shape about it. It's all good. It just is what it is. Like, where the moment that really like stood out to me was I don't know if either of you have been, but there's a lot of like small streets like that are mostly pedestrian, but like cars can go down them. And like there was a car, like a driver who's obviously like going to pick somebody up, and there's just a sea of people everywhere, and he's moving like a fraction of an inch per second, and like people are just stepping out in front of his fucking car, doing stupid shit, like stuff that here, like he'd be laying on his fucking horn, he would be like pulling his hair out, cussing at the top of his lungs, bitch, get out of the fucking road. That didn't happen. Like there was this sort of like lack of aggression, and compounded with the fact that like in Amsterdam particularly, they have a red light district where there's a bunch of half naked chicks soliciting you for sex. Everybody's fucking drunk, but like shit's not really popping off. Like, you get into a scene in the US where like you walk up on a crowd of like a bunch of drunk fucking people where they're like drunk and a little bit horny and like it's late, and like here that's like a recipe for shit to get like, to pop off. Like that's gonna explode. But there was very like, it's like wasn't that much of an issue, people like kind of ultimately were pretty chill about everything. So coming back to the US and just like looking at the fucking like people trying to like me first through an intersection, or like, any of these crazy like super aggressive like situations, they just seemed like crazy to me, because it's like, fuck, well I know that this isn't how it has to be. There's like somehow there's a way for this shit to work where that isn't the outcome. So what the fuck, what is our problem? Like, why can't we drink and not have somebody get, shot or beat up or like, some fucking stupid shit happening. I don't know. But I don't know. Did you experience anything like that coming back where you're like, fuck, this our culture is crazy?
Well, just bringing up people being shot in Korea, that there's just no guns or anything. Like,
Really?
like if you ask someone when the last time someone got shot, they would probably all tell you about like one event 10 years ago or something like that. And so in Korea, like I just always felt safe and stuff like that. Like I could walk down the darkest alley, blackout drunk at 5 a.m. by myself, like fall over with my wallet on the ground. I'd probably be okay, kind of thing. Someone might come take my wallet, but that's it. Like it was very safe. And so it was always funny because while I was there, they had there were a few scares with North Korea and South Korea.
Oh yeah.
And so like a lot of my family, was like worried about me, obviously, and asking me like, do I have an escape route and all of that stuff. And do we register with the embassy, whatnot? And like South Koreans did not bat an eye. Like they just like went on living. North Korea has been making that empty threat for a long time. Like nothing happened over there. And meanwhile, while I was there was like 4 mass shootings here. There was like a public bombing. 1,000 people were murdered, kind of thing. And like everyone was worried about me over in Korea. And I was like, no, I'm completely fine. I was like, are you guys okay back home in the States? Like it's way more dangerous. So that's something that comes to mind for sure.
Are you into Korean movies at all?
I'm not. I haven't seen a lot of them. Like I enjoy them.
What about you?
I
You
have
watch
not seen
Korean
a lot.
movies?
I love Korean food. I love Korean culture, so I'd probably
Oh,
love
yeah.
Korean movies. If I can't think of one off the top of my head.
You think there's
I'm-
Old Boy?
yeah.
Old Boy is a very
Oh,
famous one.
actually, yeah, Old Boy,
and Spike
Sympathy
Lee.
for Mr. Vengeance. That whole
Yeah.
trilogy is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, so that's like one of the. Yeah, it's a really famous one. It's
There's,
good.
I mean, I love Korean cinema. It's like, to me, one of the best scenes of cinema in the last like 10 or 15 years. Like, so many good movies come out of Korea, but like they're all fucking batshit crazy. Like, so violent, so like disturbing, like filled with all these really disturbing things. Like everything is like incest and like gruesome torture and like these very, very dark things. But like, I mean, you're not the first person to tell me that like they don't have like a really that violent culture. Like there aren't that many guns. Like people aren't, murdering people by the hundreds, walking into schools, shooting shit up.
The most dangerous places in Korea are near the American military bases because our soldiers get drunk and like might fight you and stuff like that. So the Americans that are in Korea are the biggest threat to anyone's like personal safety.
We're ruining.
I believe
right.
that.
So maybe it's not white people ruin everything; it's just Americans.
Yeah, well,
Americans are going to ruin hip
America,
hop in Korea, and
America is the byproduct of white people. It's white people personified as a country.
white people personified. I like that. It should be our motto.
But I don't know. I mean, maybe you have some kind of like insight into this like mentality of like exercising all these really dark things in art. Like, I don't know, man.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't know that about the cinema.
Oh, really?
But yeah, I mean, I don't know enough.
Dude,
about
you gotta watch some
But-
Korean
Yeah.
movies.
It might be a lot of those Far Eastern Asian countries, like I don't know, suppress a lot of individuality or like a lot of like outsider thoughts and stuff like that. You know, or like I don't know, just crazy stuff. Gruesome violence, things like that. And so maybe movies and art is like a one place where people get to kind of like play out those things or express any like interest in that kind of thing. Just because in general, like, I don't know, a lot of like saving face in your culture and stuff. And like, you don't want to be like too out there or like too weird kind of stuff. So maybe that is something that sparks that. Or like everyone knows that like, oh, we're all interested in this movie, but we can't explicitly say that we would want to. But we'll just always make movies of these themes and kind of stuff. I don't know.
I mean, I guess that raises the question, are we doing it wrong?
Like, our society values like, individuality so much, and like, everyone should accept me for me, and there's this very like selfish, indulgent side to American culture that doesn't seem to really have positive like consequences, where you might think, oh well, this other culture is somewhat more repressive in ways, but the ultimate outcome maybe isn't as bad. I don't know. I mean, I would say the fact that they don't have like school shootings and crazy like, shit like that happening every few weeks like we do. I mean, obviously they're a lot smaller, but the fact that they don't even have that, that's not even like a thing for them. I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. Like, who knows what the correct societal view, but like Korea, for instance, they have this very difficult educational system, like very hardworking, make sure their students work very hard. Most of them go to college. It's one of the best ranked school systems in the world, like nationally, for country by country. But then Korea also has the highest teen suicide and depression rates, and so I think that no matter what, there's always those trade-offs, and like, so which one? So like they don't have any school shootings and all that stuff, but they have their own things that they have to deal with, like teen suicide and depression, which I'm sure we deal with also. But
yeah. Well, would you go back? Like, would you live there again?
oh yeah, I really enjoyed it. I always felt very comfortable and welcomed, and I enjoyed it. I don't want to be a teacher, so that's why I didn't stay too long. But yeah, I had a blast and got to travel and everything.
What about you, Phil? You spent time in another country?
I have family around Europe, and that's about it. I haven't been there in years, though. That's funny. You went to South Korea for teaching? Because after I graduated, I almost did the same thing. I went to grad school instead. I think you made the right choice. I really wish I went. But I've always wanted to go to Asia. It's the next trip. Probably next trip will be Taipei, maybe.
Oh,
Yeah.
Nice.
Have you been?
I went there from Korea. 'Cause, like, I mean,
so
it's
jealous.
Like an hour plane ride,
Yeah.
so it's nothing. And Taipei is one of my favorite cities I've ever been to. That place was unbelievable.
Looks amazing.
Yeah, the food there is so good. Oh my god.
Fuck, man.
Have you been to Asia?
I have not been to Asia. I have, when I was in high school, my family did exchange programs with a Japanese school in Kobe. And so we had like, I think 5 or 6 years in a row, like we had every summer a group of students that would come and stay with like people like in our city and go to school and stuff. So I know tons and tons of people in Japan, and my brothers have gone, and I've never had the money to do it. But I really want to. But now the problem is like, it's like in Japanese culture, you have to like let them take care of you, like I couldn't go to Japan and not see all those people, and then all those people would be like, oh, we'll stay at my house. Like, and if you don't, then it's like, you're kind of like, you're fucking it up, like
Oh,
you gotta, it's complex. And then my wife is, part Japanese, and her family, everyone I know is in Kobe, which is sort of south, and everyone she is related to is further up north. So like we can't go without like visiting both of those. So it becomes like a huge fucking trip. And so haven't had the money for that one, but it's on the bucket list for sure. Hopefully I don't die of radiation poisoning, but always thinking about the negative shit. Anyway, we've been podcasting for a long fucking time now. We're at 2.5 hours in this motherfucker. So I'm going to wrap it up. We don't have any trivia this week because it wouldn't really be that fun to just do trivia with one person here. But for all you listeners out there, if anyone is still listening at this point, go to the comment section of this YouTube video, and we will do Have You Been Listening trivia. So we'll ask probably like 5 or 6 questions related to stuff covered in this episode, and whoever answers them fastest will win some kind of prize. We'll figure out what the prize is. I'll mention it in the comments section. Last week, a guy named Ben, who is living in Wisconsin, is it Wisconsin or something like that? Somewhere in the Midwest. He won super fast, and he's moving to San Francisco, so we're going to hook him up with a pair of Good for Any show tickets once he's in town, and so you might win something like that. So youtube.com/SlimsPresents, that's where you can find us every Wednesday. You can go to the Slims Presents blog at www.slimspresents.com. You can subscribe on iTunes. If you use Stitcher, you can find us through there. So we're slowly sending our tendrils out through the interweb. Every Wednesday, we'll be back with new episodes. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks again, Ben, for coming down. Thank you to our mysterious guest, the White Trash Ninja. Thanks for coming by. And thanks to Phil for coming and hanging out and sitting in and contributing to the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks a lot, guys. Check us out next week.
Like toured around the country selling these prisms at festivals. Like that was like the foundation of the Dimmer Company in like 1974 or something like that, 1970, early 70s. And that was actually, that studio was in Oakland at this warehouse, like right on the
pretty close to
estuary.
Yeah,
we went there the other day, and it was wild. This dude like still lives there, like his friend, and is like has this crazy like time like. He like literally, I think my mom thinks he's an alien. My mom literally thinks he's an alien because he like hasn't aged and like
time travel.
And like he builds these crazy like steam powered
So if you move to Oakland, you can travel in time.
You can like propel yourself across like a desert floor, like it's like steampunk, and like in a couch chair. And it's just like a steam-powered couch chair that just like propels you.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, dude.
Steam-powered?
Couch chair that just like moves you like a Segway
Basically,
scooter.
he took a couch and then like literally put a car chassis on it and a huge engine.
Provided
power
boiling water and whatever.
Yeah, and his whole. It's
There's
like
a like, yeah,
probably
there's
really
like people
loud.
It'd be like a
and
warehouse
annoying.
as big as Slim's filled with the weirdest shit you've ever seen that he made himself by his own hands.